The grand ballroom at Toronto's Fairmont Royal York was decorated like something from a luxury magazine's spread. Cascading white orchids, crystal chandeliers catching afternoon light, chairs draped in ivory silk with gold accents. My cousin Melissa had planned this wedding for 18 months, every detail calibrated to project success, sophistication and social status. I stood at the entrance watching guests find their seats, most of them dressed in designer labels I recognized from magazine advertisements. Melissa was marrying Ryan Chin, whose family owned a chain of luxury hotels across Canada. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a merger of families, fortunes and carefully curated social media brands. "Sophie, you're here." My Aunt Patricia rushed over, her mother of the bride dress shimmering with what appeared to be several $1,000s worth of beading. She glanced around expectantly. "Where's your +1? I came alone. Work has been intense." "Oh." Her smile faltered. "Well I suppose we can seat you in the back. Most of the front rows are reserved for Ryan's business associates and Melissa's influencer friends. The back is fine." Good. She patted my shoulder with practiced condescension. "You understand, don't you? This wedding is very important. Everyone who's anyone in Toronto is here. We need the optics to be perfect for social media. Melissa's wedding hashtag is already trending." My Uncle David appeared, adjusting his expensive tie. "Sophie, how's that government job treating you? Still doing secretarial work?" "Something like that." "Well, at least you have stable employment. Not everyone can be an entrepreneur like Melissa." He gestured around the ballroom with obvious pride. "She's built quite a following on Instagram. Nearly 200,000 followers. Brands send her free products all the time." I followed an usher to my assigned seat, literally the back row, right next to the service entrance where catering staff would be passing through. I could see the backs of heads in the distant altar, but I was invisible to everyone who mattered. Exactly where my family thought I belonged. As I sat down, I checked my phone. 17 missed calls from the Prime Minister's office. 23 text messages from my Deputy Chief of Staff. All marked urgent. My stomach dropped. I'd specifically arranged coverage so I could attend Melissa's wedding without disruption. The Prime Minister was supposed to be in Vancouver for the climate summit meetings. Everything had been carefully scheduled to give me this one afternoon for family obligations. I slipped out to the hallway and called back immediately. "Sophie Trudeau speaking." "Chief of Staff Trudeau, thank God." My deputy sounded frantic. The Vancouver summit collapsed. Security concerns forced an evacuation. The Prime Minister is returning to Toronto early and needs the emergency response briefing immediately. "I'm at my cousin's wedding. The briefing materials are at my office." "The Prime Minister is already en route to the Fairmont. She saw the location on your calendar and realized you were attending a family wedding at the same venue. She's coming directly to you." I felt the blood drain from my face. "She's coming here? To the wedding ceremony? She needs the briefing before the emergency cabinet meeting in 2 hours. The situation is escalating quickly." He paused. "Also, Sophie, she's not happy that your family seated you in the back row. She saw the seating chart when security did their venue sweep." "Security sweep? How did?" "Standard protocol for any venue the Prime Minister will enter. The RCMP team noticed your name placement and flagged it." I closed my eyes. "How long until she arrives?" 15 minutes. Her security detail is coordinating with hotel security now." I walked back into the ballroom where the ceremony was about to begin. Guests had settled into their seats, the front rows filled with people in designer outfits holding phones ready to capture every moment for Instagram. Melissa stood at the back, resplendent in her Vera Wang gown, preparing for her grand entrance. She spotted me and frowned. "Why are you lurking back here? Your seat is," she waved vaguely toward the back row. "Over there." I needed to take a call. "Well, the ceremony is starting. Please get to your seat and turn off your phone. We're going completely unplugged for the processional. No phones except the official photographer." She adjusted her veil with practiced precision. "This needs to be perfect for our social media announcement." I didn't mention that in approximately 12 minutes, the Prime Minister of Canada would be entering her unplugged ceremony with a full RCMP security detail. The music started. Bridesmaids began their slow walk down the aisle, each one pausing strategically for the photographer. The guests obediently kept their phones tucked away, creating the perfect aesthetic Melissa had demanded. Then I heard the commotion in the hallway. Security entered first, discreet but unmistakable. The RCMP officers positioned themselves at key points around the ballroom. Hotel security coordinated with them, and suddenly the carefully orchestrated ceremony ground to a confused halt. The music stopped. Bridesmaids froze mid-aisle. 300 wedding guests turned to see what was happening. Prime Minister Catherine Morrison entered the Fairmont ballroom flanked by her security detail, her chief of communications and 2 members of her cabinet. She was in a business suit rather than wedding attire, but her presence commanded immediate attention. Her eyes scanned the room and found me in the back row near the service entrance. Her expression shifted from professional focus to something that looked like genuine anger. "Sophie, there you are." She walked directly toward me, ignoring the frozen wedding party, the confused groom at the altar, the 300 guests documenting this unexpected moment on phones that were no longer tucked away. "I need the emergency response briefing immediately, but first," she looked at the back row where I sat, then at the front rows filled with influencers and business associates. "Why are you seated here?" "Family seating arrangements, Prime Minister." "Family arrangements." She repeated the words like they tasted bitter. "My chief of staff, the person who coordinates the entire federal government's operations, is seated in the back row near the kitchen entrance?" My Aunt Patricia had materialized, her face cycling through shock, confusion, and dawning horror. "Prime Minister Morrison. What an unexpected. We had no idea you'd be attending." "I'm not attending. I'm here on urgent government business." Prime Minister Morrison looked directly at my aunt. "Though I'm curious about your seating arrangements. You placed Sophie in the back row. May I ask why?" "Well, we thought she'd be comfortable there. Sophie works for the government, but this wedding has a lot of very important people." "Sophie works for me. She's my chief of staff. She manages every major policy initiative, coordinates with provincial premiers, oversees federal emergency responses, and basically runs the operational side of the entire government." The Prime Minister's voice carried across the silent ballroom. "She's the reason we successfully negotiated the infrastructure agreement with 3 provinces last month. She's the reason we avoided a national rail strike that could have crippled the economy. And you seated her in the back row because she's not an Instagram influencer." The silence was absolute. Melissa stood frozen in her Vera Wang gown, her perfect entrance completely derailed. Ryan looked like he was trying to solve an equation that didn't make sense. The photographer had lowered his camera, clearly unsure whether to document this moment. Prime Minister Morrison turned to address the entire room. "I apologize for interrupting this ceremony, but we have a genuine national emergency that requires Sophie's immediate attention. However, before we leave," she looked at the front row where Melissa's influencer friends sat in their borrowed designer clothes. "I think there's been a serious misunderstanding about what constitutes importance." She gestured for me to stand. "Sophie Trudeau has a master's degree in public policy from the London School of Economics. She's worked in government for 9 years, rising through the ranks based on merit and capability. When I became Prime Minister 3 years ago, I chose her as Chief of Staff because she's brilliant, dedicated, and absolutely essential to governing this country effectively." Prime Minister Morrison looked directly at Melissa. "Your cousin coordinates federal disaster responses. She negotiates with foreign governments. She manages a staff of 200 people. Last week, she worked 80 hours to resolve a crisis between 2 provincial premiers that could have triggered a constitutional challenge. And you seated her in the back row behind people whose main accomplishment is posting sponsored content about skincare products." Melissa's face had gone from bridal glow to mortified crimson. "Now then," Prime Minister Morrison continued, her tone shifting to practical efficiency. "Sophie, I need the emergency response briefing. Let's use the hotel's conference room." She looked at Melissa again. "And Sophie will be sitting front row when she returns, if she chooses to return at all. My chief of staff doesn't sit in service areas. Ever." She placed her hand on my shoulder and pulled me into a brief, fierce hug that was captured by at least 50 phone cameras. "You deserve better than this, Sophie. Your family should be proud of you, not hiding you in the back." The walk out of the ballroom felt surreal. Our CMP officers created a protective corridor, and Prime Minister Morrison walked beside me discussing the emergency response protocols as if we were in Parliament Hill instead of crashing my cousin's wedding. Behind us, I could hear the confused murmurs starting, phones emerging to Google my name, people suddenly realizing that the woman relegated to the back row was more important than anyone had imagined. In the hotel's executive conference room, the Prime Minister's cabinet members had already set up briefing materials. We spent the next 90 minutes coordinating emergency responses, contacting provincial premiers, and managing the crisis that had forced the Vancouver summit evacuation. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from family. Panicked texts from Melissa. Tearful calls from my Aunt Patricia. Even my parents, who'd missed the disruption because they arrived late, left confused voicemails asking what happened. I silenced everything and focused on the actual important work. Protecting public safety, coordinating government responses, doing the job that had consumed my life for the past 3 years while my family dismissed it as secretarial work. When we finally finished, Prime Minister Morrison sat back in her chair and studied me. How long have they been treating you like you don't matter? Pretty much always. They know I work for the government, but they've never asked for details. They just assumed I was administrative staff. And you never corrected them? I tried. Multiple times. But they weren't interested in listening. They were too focused on Melissa's Instagram brand and her wedding plans. Prime Minister Morrison shook her head. I've dealt with hostile foreign governments that showed more respect to their junior diplomats than your family shows to you. She stood up. For what it's worth, Sophie, you're the best chief of staff I could ask for. The government functions because of your competence and dedication. If your family can't see that, they're fools. He paused at the door. Are you going back to the reception? I thought about Melissa's perfect wedding, now infamous as the ceremony interrupted by the Prime Minister. I thought about the back row seat near the service entrance. I thought about years of being dismissed and overlooked because my success didn't look like Instagram-worthy wealth. No. I don't think I am. Good. You have better things to do. Like preventing national crises and running the country's operations. She smiled. Though I should mention, you're going to be all over social media by tonight. Melissa's wedding hashtag is about to become very popular for the wrong reasons. He was right. By the time I returned to my office in downtown Toronto, the videos had already gone viral. Multiple angles of the Prime Minister entering Melissa's ceremony, the stunned wedding party, the moment she'd called out my family for their seating arrangements. Someone had created a hashtag #BackRow Chief of Staff. The story was everywhere. Prime Minister crashes wedding to defend disrespected Chief of Staff. Instagram influencer's wedding interrupted when cousin turns out to be government power player. One particularly savage headline read, "When your +1 is the Prime Minister, a family's reckoning." Melissa's perfect social media wedding had become famous as the event where the bride's family publicly humiliated someone far more important than anyone realized, and got called out by the Prime Minister of Canada in front of 300 witnesses with cameras. My parents finally reached me that evening. "Sophie, sweetheart, we just saw the videos. You're the Chief of Staff? Why didn't you tell us?" "I did tell you. Repeatedly. You just weren't interested enough to ask questions. But we thought you were a secretary or something. You never said you were running the Prime Minister's office." "I told you I was the Chief of Staff. I mentioned coordinating federal policy at every family dinner. You changed the subject every time to talk about Melissa's engagement photos or wedding planning." My mother was crying. "We put you in the back row." "Oh God, Sophie," the Prime Minister hugged you and everyone saw. Everyone saw that I matter to people who actually understand what I do. That's all that happened, Mom. Melissa sent a series of increasingly desperate messages. Her perfect wedding was now internationally famous for all the wrong reasons. The videos showing my back row seat, the Prime Minister's rebuke, the contrast between influencer friends and actual government power. It was everywhere. "You've ruined everything," her final message read. "My wedding is a joke now. Everyone is talking about you instead of me." I didn't respond. Because the truth was that Melissa had ruined it herself when she decided I wasn't important enough to sit with family, when she valued Instagram aesthetics over actual relationships, when she measured success by follower counts instead of real accomplishments. The back row near the service entrance had been her statement about my worth. The Prime Minister's hug, witnessed by 300 people and millions online, was the universe's response. I didn't need my family's recognition. I had the respect of the Prime Minister, the trust of the federal government, and the knowledge that my work affected millions of Canadians every single day. I'd proven my worth to the people who actually mattered. And that was enough.